All right, and we are live. Welcome, fiends, to handle a Whisker presented by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. We are a horror podcast discussing horror movies and the phobias that they emphasize. And with me tonight, as always, are both of my co-hosts. We have Holly, Hooch, and John. Guys, here we are, slowly winding down the month in our Fear of Age deep dive with Gerascophobia. And, we got some pretty cool stuff in the works for next month, which we'll be talking about later on tonight as we are doing back-to-back recordings. But I'm excited because this is kind of like our first foray into kind of like a specific period of horror releases with tonight's selection, which was, of course, one of John's picks. So, John, why don't you go ahead and introduce what we'll be talking about tonight?
So, The Man Who Could Cheat Death, which I wanted to go with kind of a classic old school horror movie, Hammer. But it's not obviously one of the Dracula or Frankenstein, but it does have Christopher Lee in it. And I can't remember the main actor's name at this point.
Anton something.
And it's a classic sort of slow-paced, kind of slow burn horror movie about a guy who's trying to prolong his life and his youth through science, mad science. And he's kind of a hip, cool guy. He's an artist.
He's an artist. That's why the lady.
And he's a doctor.
and he's a doctor. He's a doctor.
All the ladies love him, and all the guys want to be him.
It makes no sense, but yeah. Christopher Lee's in this movie, for fuck's sake.
Mm-hmm.
Really hot.
Yeah.
And classic, going back to the 1950s, 1959, the very early years of Hammer. I think they'd only just put out Dracula, maybe before that. Only a couple of movies they'd put out at this point. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so kind of going old school with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, last week we had Lore Galore in The Taking of Deborah Logan, and tonight we got, a bit of a throwback. And I have to say, I haven't seen a ton of Hammer films. Now, is this movie going to change my mind on whether or not I go pursue more Hammer films? Probably not. But I will say, I was entertained, but everything starts to happen, I was like, okay, but why did this happen? And then I'm like, oh, that's an interesting elixir. Why is he doing that? So the science aspect of it I thought was interesting because it kind of borrows some similar trends to other things that we've kind of seen. But then when it got to the end, I sat there and I was like, oh, I guess that happened. Just with the way that it ends, because I'm just trying to be why wouldn't you just leave? Okay, we're just going to burn here. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say real quick, and I mentioned this before when we were kind of talking about this, or we actually watched this together, and I was saying this movie is in a modern horror movie, this movie is what would be playing on TV and one of the characters in the background.
Right.
Where they always have a weird, cheesy old horror movie playing. That's this movie. It's got all that kind of classic, putting the light under the character's face so that it puts the heavy shadow, when you put the flashlight under your face, Halloween style. And all the kind of classic old school horror tropes.
Mm-hmm.
I will say all of the leading actresses' outfits were so fucking good. I was we're sitting there late at night, we're getting pretty drunk. I'm like, fucking good dress. So I was pretty impressed with everything she wore. That was fucking amazing. Look, I'm already cursing up a storm. So impressed.
To address your point, definitely this isn't a movie that's going to convert people to be.
It's a slower one.
Yeah. Really, the first Dracula movie that they put out is a good one to start with if you want to check out something that'll kind of pull you into those movies, or the stick with the Dracula or Frankenstein movies with Peter Cushing, because those are significantly better. But I did want to just sort of pull in Hammer on the fear of aging. So you had to go with this. And it is kind of a classic, even though it's a highly rated classic, even though it's really not as good as many of the other movies that they would end up putting out.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we couldn't remember the lead actor's name, Anton for sure, and then I can't remember the last name. But I was, just doing a little bit of homework and copying off of some of our fellow reviewers. Did you know that he was a refugee from Germany, and that apparently a lot of German refugees played Nazis in movies? That was pretty interesting.
And he played some Nazis too.
He played some Nazis,
Not
and
surprising.
he had to flee because he was a gay man. Oh, interesting.
I mean, he would have been in danger for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I thought that was really neat. But this movie actually has a pretty good pedigree, considering that he's a really established actor. The writer, I think, was also a writer, and then the director as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then, of course, Christopher Lee, a very young Christopher Lee, super dashing.
Mm-hmm.
So between Christopher Lee and the outfits that the lady was wearing, I was pretty happy about them.
Right. So this is actually based on a play, The Man in Half Moon Street, by Barry Lyndon, which was previously filmed in 1945. And, kind of like the story revolves around this doctor, Benet, played by Anton Diffrin, is the actor, and his quest for eternal life. So in order to maintain his, youthful appearance, the doctor has to extract this specific gland from the living every 10 years. And, only one man right now is capable of doing this sort of operation, that being Dr. Wise. So Wise recently had suffered from a stroke, which does kind of come into play because he is looking to find a successor in order to, continue to do these sort of operations for the doctor. That way, Benet can, live further in his life, which is pretty lengthy, which we'll get into later on, because that is kind of one of the twists towards the third act of the movie. But, with Wise unable to, perform this sort of operation again, he's really just trying to find someone to fit the bill. And really, there's only one person that they're looking at, and that is one of the other surgeons, Pierre Gerard, who is played by the very dashing Christopher Lee. So you kind of have this conflict of interest at play here, because you have Gerard, who just so happens to be in love with the same woman as Benet. Go figure, they're both smitten by the same woman, because, what old movie would it not be without for, a love triangle, in this case?
Yeah, a love triangle.
But, the whole time, I'm just thinking about, they're having this party, and this guy's, a sculptor. And, at one point, this is, when the investigation is starting to open, he's like, oh, is, this bus still there? And I'm just thinking the entire time, yeah, you just want to see that chick naked, because all the busts are from, the waist up. Because you don't really see, the full cleavage of, the women in them, as good as the dresses are in it. So that was, a running joke when we were watching this on Tuesday night. It's just like, oh yeah, we just have this storage room full of smut, or bus in this case, to varying degrees, and some of them were a lot older than others. But it's just we didn't really get any of that, and then, we also watched The Hunger after that, which we'll be talking about later tonight. And then it's so we got smut in bus form, and then we basically had a movie that's really only a cult classic because of a very specific scene, which is also smut involved. So, we kind of got a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. So it was kind of a good comparison piece in this case.
You mentioned that mentioned them as companion pieces to each other. We got the same sense when we were watching them this week. Wait, yes, when was that? Saturday. The days are just flying by. So, but for a really specific reason, and John, I thought you were really clever when you were bringing up how they both treat the fear of aging or they portray people that are fearing aging as addicts, which I thought was really neat. Now that's, and that's been used, very in various movies, but now that I think about it, a lot of, which is, plays a lot into the fear of Diana, the fear of aging, and this movie in particular, like it's just that's a. I can't think of one where they don't use the attic
Mm.
sort of I don't know metaphor.
Yeah,
Is
and,
that accurate? You know what?
yeah, and vampires are kind of that a bit to a certain extent, which of course, The Hunger is basically a vampire. We won't go there yet.
Not yet, not yet.
But and yeah, it's for him. It's definitely for Doctor. What was it again? Doctor Bo is Bonet? Is that Christopher Lee?
No,
No,
that's
he's
No.
he's
the Anton, yeah.
yeah. That as being kind of like a drug addict, um, in the way that he uses it and needs it, and his need for precision timing and a better
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
watch,
My favorite
which
was
was great.
indescript bottle of green goo next to, I guess, a little measuring beaker, but it just looked like a little shot glass.
Mhm.
And he always has to get it out of the shot glass. I'm like, really? Really? You've been doing this for like freaking like 80 years?
And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Rebo,
Mhm.
the genetic opera too, where
Ah.
in the beginning of the movie we see him going and extracting the fluid or whatever from people. He's killing people to get his fluid.
Yeah, for citrate.
And extracting it with a needle from their head or their face or something.
It's always amazing. I love the possibility that science can sort of fix this really unfixable problem. Well, I mean, there's no reason why. I mean, good, but I just love that in movies that it's just like, well, science.
Mhm.
That'll fix everything. And I certainly grew up thinking science could fix everything.
Well, they are working on that, of course,
True.
like slowing aging.
Like stem cells, you can rub on your face.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never get into the science or the experiments exactly of what he's doing or how he's creating it. He's kind of does it in a safe.
So they didn't even show where the gland. Oh, actually, the gland is from inside, right?
Yeah, there isn't. This movie is lacking in some lore of, why does he have? We see him with his early on in the movie with his toxic hand where he burns her face
Yeah,
and
what's
her
that all
arm by
about?
touching him, but that's never quite explained.
He fucked her up too. Like that stayed on her.
I liked that twist, by the way.
Oh, at the end?
We just assumed, of course, that she died, but she was still alive and went crazy. That was actually
That was really neat.
I did not expect,
And then she gets her revenge.
but not to jump ahead.
Not
too
to jump
quick,
ahead,
but-
right?
Yeah,
You can see more of the
so like one of the connecting themes with this movie is how like all of these beautiful women just so happen to be disappeared around the time that the doctor needs this infusion, basically, and that's what ends up opening the investigation, as it does happen every 10 years. Now the inspector asks Gerard about Margot and the bust, but he ends up lying about it, saying like, oh yeah, like it was destroyed earlier today, and everyone at the party was just like, hey man, like it's still here. But he basically just chalked it up to being like, oh yeah, well if the cops took it, they would have damaged it, and that would have been the end of his work. He was very particular about that.
What's that all about? Did they have an explanation other than he wanted to make sure nobody messed with it, or?
I don't think so. I mean, and they also kind of revealed at the end that he was bus of all of his victims.
Right. All of his girlfriends, he was, he was killing them and taking their gland, their indescript gland.
Which does seem sort of unusual to be sort of a high profile artist who like socially is high profile and then killing your models.
And they're like, well, that's why I had to leave Italy. Like, okay, so you went one country over, mixing with the same crowd. But I mean, I'm being a little critical, but I actually did enjoy it quite a bit. And my favorite part was 1890 or 1889 Paris. Here's the Eiffel Tower. And immediately had to go to. I'm like, when did that fucker go up? All right, we're good.
Yeah, it went up like a year before
The year
the
before the
takes
movie
place.
takes place.
Although somehow I doubt they actually checked. I'm sure they just assumed it was there.
Or Lee knew just from memory, like, oh yeah, I remember hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I wanted to do, I was hoping that we could read Christopher Lee's Wikipedia page, but we can leave that for the end.
Okay.
Okay.
But
So a lot of like the middle ground of this is just like trying to find Wise's successor. And Gerard is basically the one who is trying to get, that role. He's very reluctant to accept it, but he has like some conditions like, hey, you have to show me how to do this. You have to have your presence there. But of course, with all of those lion conditions, things don't exactly go as planned. There's always some sort of trouble afoot. So Wise ends up disappearing, leaving Gerard to back out of the operation. So you have Bonet, who at the time is holding Janine, who is, the shared love interest in this case. She's being held hostage, and he confronts.
Sorta.
Yeah, sort of, and confronts Gerard with facts as to like what he's been working on over all of these years. So Gerard is basically put in this position where he realizes that he doesn't really have a choice but to help Janine, and he opts to perform this operation on Bonet, which he fakes. so here you have like Bonet thinking like he's all fine and good. Definitely not the case, and then we get to see like the Asian process. But it's interesting because here you have like this doctor who appears to be mid-30s, and he's keeping his youth despite the fact that he's actually 104 years old, which is later revealed. And I thought that was a pretty unique twist because like you knew obviously this guy has lived a pretty lengthy life, otherwise he wouldn't be having this sort of operation done to him, and we had seen how many busts there were, so we kind of like have an idea of what the time frame was with 10-year intervals. But I didn't know if like the elixir aspect of it was like a backup to like slow the process, like because the one doctor was running late, and that was kind of like an ongoing theme in the movie, and that's why he was trying to like rush things along. So it kind of felt like the elixir was just a way to like prolong the effect, but it wasn't something that was permanent.
No. In fact, I mean, if I remember correctly, they were saying how the elixir only comes in at the tail end of the 10 years. Like once he gets that operation, he's good for like apparently 9.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very end is when he needs to be using this elixir in order to keep himself going, right? And then of course these clowns, they don't last very long. So if the guy isn't there to make that operation, he has to keep going out and getting more clans, which he does at the beginning. There's no way to say that word.
more
Clans. He's got to get, I mean, like the beginning of the movie, he's killing people very Jack Ripperish style, which was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then it kind of throws you off because you kind of think the movie's going in a different direction.
Well, I want to say that's another good aspect of the movie and a good twist in the movie that was done well was that when we meet the initial relationship between the older doctor and the young doctor, we automatically assume that the older doctor was his mentor and they're really close because they had a mentor and student relationship. And then you get the twist that they were actually contemporaries back in the early 1800s and that he hasn't been aging the whole time, but that the other doctor had. And it's kind of fun too because the other doctor, the older doctor, he's very like, have you figured it out? Have you figured out like how to do this? Because he wants to also benefit from the other doctor's discoveries, Dr. Benet's discoveries, and hopefully help him because he's had a stroke and he can't perform surgeries anymore. And that was actually really well done.
And then that weird, like, psychotic excuse as to why not share the discovery with the world, which was like, well, just imagine it, overpopulation, shortage of food. I'm like, you got a little bit of a point, but also it's evil.
Well, it's also it was also the side of like, well, if no one is dying, then there's no glands to actually use.
That's right.
Well, no, and it's actually like a good. I liked that point when he brought that up because that's not. I don't think something people thought about a lot back then, but that is a bigger issue now. That like as we prolong our lifespans and we populate more and more, like we're sort of creating situations that are happening now, nowadays, in that kind of way. Because I mean, back in the lifespan, off the top of my head, I'm just sort of generalizing, but in that time in the 1800s, I think the average lifespan was probably something like 50 or 60 years. Like, uh,
Call it 65.
and I'm pretty sure we basically extended
On
the
average.
average lifespan
Average.
close to like 20 years.
Mhm.
You know, now people live to be 80, 90, 100 years old. Back then, you were old when you were 60 because there's not a lot of medicine, not a lot of, you know,
Now 60s is the new 30s. So, you know.
and so we are kind of accomplishing what he was trying to do.
I wish we could do it better, though. Because I feel like the quality of life should stay up there.
Instead, turning
Ooh, it's like you're into it. Yeah, not turning green and having acidic hands.
which is never quite explained. It's,
And why, like, only when he needed the potion, because he certainly could touch the ladies
Mhm.
if he wasn't hulking out.
yeah, it was only when we were calling it hulking out. Whenever
He also seemed really upset, so it's like he totally seemed like he was hulking out.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, what else can you think of when it's primarily just green? But you know, like there's this whole confrontation between Wise and Bonet after Wise discovers that the newest glands that he's been using have been from the living people instead of being kind of like revitalized from a corpse, which is what they had been doing. So when Wise confronts Bonet about it, he's basically like, this is just unjustified. And Bonet just responds back that, yeah, like, sure, the glands were revitalized, but, they had all died because you were late. Like he's just looking at his watch constantly throughout this whole movie, and Wise just flips out and ends up destroying the elixir to prevent Bonet from continuing the work. And that's, kind of when you have that confrontation where he's just grabbing Wise by the neck to strangle him to death. But, it is very funny because, like, when you see that sort of deterioration, it's a quick, like, mood change. You also have, like, the discoloration of the eyes. You start to see, like, the acidic effect or, like, the burn effects from the hands, which I thought was interesting, which we kind of saw earlier in the movie, too, when he puts his hand on the one model's mouth. And like when that happened, I was just like, wait, what? Like, that's what I wish I knew more about, because like, what's happening? Is it, are they just saying that, he's deteriorating, so like his body is acidic? Like, I did not understand what was happening in that moment, because it's not clear to the viewer, which is unfortunate, but it's set up to be like, well, he's kind of like zombified in a way, but that wouldn't really explain why he has this capability.
Yeah, I wonder if the play explained it more, since it is based on a play. I feel like that may have been more of in the story, possibly.
I'd like to check that out.
But yeah, they really kind of gloss over that. They definitely focus on the relationships and the characters in like. The science part, the mad science part, is kind of put to the side a bit, for sure.
Right, because I mean, there wasn't that much mad science. I mean, like the formula was just kept in a safe in his office, and
he didn't really.
And Christopher Lee just did the operation on a couch in his office. Although one of my favorite parts in the movie was when he's looking for a substitute surgeon. And, he goes to, like, reputable doctors, and they're like, no can do. That's too creepy. And then he goes to that really gross, dirty doctor. Yeah, the drug doctor. And he's like, all right, you're going to do this? He's like, yeah, I'm good. He's taking a swig of booze, and he's like, you want to forget it. He just leaves.
Yeah, he's like, the booze steadies my hand.
It steadies my hand. I can drive better with it, too. Like, oh, my God.
Yeah, Dr. Buddy's like, good.
I can't let you touch my gland. Oh, yeah.
And yeah, then he has to resort to kidnapping the model to force.
Did he kidnap? Did he just talk her into going over there, or did he actually? Did he sedate her?
Yeah, he prisons in his underground dungeon with the woman from before.
I thought that wasn't his house. I thought that was like the freaking like train depot or something.
Oh, was that like
his storage compartment at a train depot or something?
Yeah, like in the London Underground.
Did he like freak her out and she faint and then he took her over, or did he like chloroform her or something, or what? Can't remember that now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know.
It was late. We were drinking.
But yeah, and so he has to force Christopher Lee into
Right.
doing the operation.
Mhm.
But of course, that was a good one too.
That was a nice twist.
That was another successful one because you kind of think in a movie like this, it's going to be very straightforward. And I'll just do it. But then he was like, I didn't do anything.
I got so excited.
I
Like, you go Christopher Lee. Well, it was hilarious because he was like, I love like his bedside manner. Like, well, we're done with your operation. You should be fine. You should be able to walk around and run and backstab me. Like, it's just hilarious how easily of a recovery this operation is, which makes me think, like, why didn't he just learn how to do the operation his fucking self?
Right.
Why not? Maybe if it was a weird angle, I
Mhm.
get it. But even then, like, he's got 100 years or 74 years to figure out how to use a series of mirrors and,
And they didn't really
Operation
explain
tools.
what the operation.
It was the gland.
Like he was going to get like a permanent gland replaced.
No, well, the operation, it wasn't a permanent gland. It was just another substitute gland. It was just
Mhm.
another 10 years of life.
Right.
It wasn't going to fix anything. It was just going to prolong his life. He was going to make it up to 114. That would have been accomplished.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I did really like when they were in the storage unit though, when like Janine's down there with him, and he's showing like all his prior work, and he's like, "Oh, here's this thing that I crafted when I was 12 years old," and she's like dusting it off, and you can see like it clearly says 1798 on it, and she's like doing the math in her head like out loud.
Wait.
I'm like, that can't be right. That would make you like 104 years old.
Everybody was so good at math in this movie because I was like, I was doing the math. I woke up, I'm like, she beat me to it. It was late. We were drinking.
Hmm.
So, right. But I thought that was a great scene. It was really nice to see him go that step further in the transformation. So that was fun. And it was annoying that it wasn't until he was pretty horrifying that she was like, all right, I'm out.
Mhm.
But it was also cool for her to see her romantic rival in such a bad state, and she tries to comfort her, and man, she got messed up bad. I mean, she's still wearing that same dress from the first scene. Her face is still messed up, and I'm like, have you been feeding her regularly? I mean, I guess so, because it's only been like 2 weeks, right? A
Yeah,
week?
it's been a
Not
week.
even a week, right? Because they had the party, and then she stayed over the night not by accident, but that blonde, didn't go home, and that's why she got killed. And then it was like the next day. So it's only been like 2 days.
It's just been a few.
Mhm.
It's not that many. 3 days
She
at
went,
most.
she went crazy down
She went-
there.
Well, I bet these women in Hammer Horror Classics have such delicate dispositions.
Yeah.
They
definitely.
go crazy over anything.
I also want to point out that this was a movie where Christopher Lee got to play the good guy.
Mhm.
And that was a big thing with him and Hammer Horror, was that they always wanted him to play Dracula,
Mhm.
and they would never give him roles where
Oh.
he didn't play Dracula. And it really annoyed him and made him want to stop making those movies and go do other things. And so this was kind of like one of maybe 2 or 3 of all the Hammer Horror movies where he isn't playing Dracula or a bad guy.
Ooh, can we talk about the apartment? The never-ending apartment that had like 5-10 different rooms. The thing was quaint. That was the nicest apartment.
Yeah, they would be talking in one room with a fireplace and
And then
a
in green wallpaper.
Yeah.
Very green wallpaper and badass couches.
And then they would like get up and everybody would walk to another room and then they would continue the conversation in a
Red.
new room.
Yeah. And big old
Different
windows. I was like, shit, that's
Yeah.
a nice room. And he's got like his office and the library. I'm like, God damn, I guess there are, apartments. It's not in my world.
Yeah,
That's what is-
remember when houses actually had libraries?
Excuse me, I have a corner with 3 books over here.
This is one of the things about Hammer movies and the British film industry that's good, is that they have a smaller industry and it's more enclosed and more kind of formalized.
Mhm.
And so a lot of those sets and costumes and things are things that kind of exist for
Right.
other purposes, and so these are low budget movies, but they have access to really good quality costumes and sets and things like that.
That's
It
cool.
looks a lot better than if you compare things to like what's his name? The famous American low budget filmmaker.
Roma?
No, before that. Uh the famous low budget 60s filmmaker who did all the Edgar Allan Poe movies
Oh, Vincent Price.
with Vincent Price. Those movies, like if you look at the sets and
Yeah,
costumes,
they're
like
a little
are
lower
not
class.
up to the level.
Everything's
of,
styrofoam or whatever. That was
Mhm.
invented.
Things really feel like a set, whereas these are sets in the Hammer movies, but just feel a lot better, higher quality.
And they're over in Europe. They probably have like old furniture somebody donated that was like 400 years old.
Yeah.
Supposed to over here where nothing's older than
They have to build it all from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Corman. That's what it was.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Roger Corman. Yeah, like all those kind of Edgar Allan Poe movies he made in the 60s.
Those are great. Is it time to read the Wikipedia page of a certain Mr. Christopher Lee? Is he there?
I'm trying to
He's there.
think. I'm trying to think of like what else we need to talk about. Okay, so
And-
Margot was found in prison, which was one of the other twists.
Oh, yes.
Still being alive at this point, she's completely batshit crazy. Also being held in the storage room. We talked about the faked operation, in which case Bonet rushes to the storeroom as Pierre and the investigator are basically like following in pursuit. And at this point, he just wants Janine to have the same operation so that the two of them can, live forever. So they can be, forever young and forever beautiful in this case. But, Janine
Janine
refuses, and Bonet begins to decompose and age rapidly. And of course, we have to talk about the pivotal scene. We have a lamp throw. Finally, it's been a while, but in this case, it's an oil lamp because of the time. And of course, what happens? The room goes ablaze, and poor Janine is there, but luckily she gets rescued by Pierre, as Bonet and Margot die in the flames, and that's when I'm just like, okay, like she's not even trying to make an attempt to like get out. Nope, we're just going to burn here.
What was it? You said a lamp throw?
Yeah, she threw an oil lamp.
Yeah, it was an
But
oil lamp.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I missed. Is that like a thing that you guys have brought up before?
Well, a long time ago, we did a fear of children. That was like our very first fear. Actually, our very first fear. And one of the movies that we did was called Happy Birthday.
To me.
Happy Birthday Massacre. Killer kids and their birthdays. I can't remember. But it was about these three little kids well, let's not get into it too much, but long story short, they're evil, they're bad, and somebody takes one of them down by throwing just a straight up lamp at them.
Nice.
12-year-olds, so they're pretty small.
Yeah. So you can just knock them out with them.
You
Nice.
can just knock them out with a lamp.
Yep.
And they're like smaller than average, too.
Yeah, so anytime there's any sort of lamp throw, I always pop
You get
for it.
They start a fire in that movie.
No, that one just knocked a kid out. It wasn't like
okay.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, like, so he's obsessed with Janine getting this operation, but she's like 26 or not even like 24. He's like, she's got a couple years, dude. Like, she doesn't need it today. You should worry about yourself.
That's it.
Yeah, she's not gonna sag in that period,
Yeah, and even then, it only goes.
And they do, of course, the reveal of all the busts, as we mentioned before.
That was cool. I like that a lot.
Which was good.
Like, there's been many Janines.
And he mentions, the different the different locations that he's moved from city to city and country to country. Continuing his little thing, which also kind of connects a bit with the next movie, The Hunger,
Right.
where it's kind of like this legacy of victims that the main character is left behind, and kind
I'm
of like
excited to
makes like a memorial of, which we'll get into with The Hunger. But and of course, we're in San Francisco, and they mentioned that one of his locations that he
I was like,
bus was San Francisco.
I got excited too. I was like,
Right hotel.
San Francisco.
That it was there. And that must have been like if you it
Well,
would have
this was
been
89 or 98. It was 98, right?
it would have been like Wild West kind of
Well,
stuff.
yeah, because I mean,
Years.
San Francisco was established in the 1840s, so yeah, like not that
It
not
would've
that
been
much development.
early on for sure.
No wonder I went back to London. I mean,
And there was sort of an implication. I don't know if they were doing on purpose that he was sort of maybe was Jack the Ripper or something like
oh,
that. You know,
and you mean not just like the initial?
the way they were showing it, and I think so. They may have like one of the I think the police investigator character sort of. I don't know if
gotcha.
he mentioned Jack the Ripper, but it sort of felt like they were implying that he
And-
could have been.
And given the time and the place, right?
But I don't, yeah, I'm not sure if that was. But
I have to think, that first kill with the old man in the park. My first thought was like, well, at least it wasn't some prostitute. That sounds nice.
yeah, he didn't. That's like, yeah, that's the thing. In Hammer horror movies, the street walking
Some poor sex worker, they get it a lot.
it.
And then they get it a lot.
Which, of course, is again based on Jack the Ripper and those stories and everything. But yeah, so it's funny because it's like the movie gets kind of good ratings overall, even though it's definitely not the best of the Hammer horror movies. But it's funny because it does a lot of things right. It just kind of like falls down ultimately.
I think it's a little slow in the middle.
Yeah, it's a little bit slow and it doesn't explain things well enough,
Right.
but it does a bunch of parts well where it kind of sustains you through the movie where it's still kind of an enjoyable watch, even though.
And all of the actors are really solid. Yeah, they held my attention.
Yeah,
So that was pretty. Even with Anton's ever so slightly overacting, but it was. But he was dying. Of course, he was gonna overreact.
he's a good mad scientist. I like mad scientists, and they needed to put him in a lab coat and give him a lab to work on his formula, at least for a scene.
Mhm.
I don't think we ever saw a lab.
Nope.
No,
Or anybody washing their hands.
we kind of needed that. But
Yeah, I'm kind of
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not a prolonging or
No,
a fear of
it's a
age. That's
bringing
just
back-
bringing back. Yeah. But it does have those kind of touchstones, if you will, with
Mhm.
Reanimator, the kind of classic.
Is there any more connections? I mean, we were talking a little bit about how the fear of aging is seems to be regularly associated with like being an addict. Like, what's that? Like that's. I mean, it's exciting, but is there any other
That kind of chasing the dragon,
Chasing,
that
yeah.
feeling kind of thing where you're trying to prolong a good thing
prolong a good thing?
unnaturally prolong that good feeling of youth and
Sorry, I'm just like I'm just relating. Like that never works out.
I mean, this is a definite fear of aging for sure, because that's his entire motivation. It's not like he sort of lies and says he's he doesn't even lie and say he's trying to do it for the rest of at this point, like as you mentioned, he's like, you know what? This isn't even for other people. You guys can't handle this. I shouldn't let this out. This is just for me and my close friends, maybe.
Yeah, he probably shouldn't have thrown a party like the day before he needed to take that potion so much, or the day after he needed to take that potion so much. Shouldn't you keep a low profile?
Well, he's gotta keep
Calendar
his
open.
appearances, But the way I saw it, it's just like he's just gonna keep on killing so he can grow his bus collection.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Like he's gonna have to keep carting that thing around. He's got to crate
my
those
goodness.
things up and
Mhm.
move them to his new city.
Yep.
I mean, he's kind of creating a burden for himself.
I think they just did that all the time. Right? So here's my piano. Let's take it to London from San Francisco.
And he is really wealthy from living so long and
Yeah.
everything, so he can.
You always see people that have that have achieved longevity like that as being rich, but I think once it'd be kind of funny to see somebody who's lived like 200 years and they just couldn't figure it out. They're still living in a studio apartment, and
That's like you know who that is? That's the vampire character from the Preacher.
Oh,
What's his name? Cassidy. That's Cassidy.
yeah,
from
that's
The
pretty
Preacher,
good.
Basically, still a screw up.
Yeah, still a screw up forever.
For 200 years.
That's hilarious. Oh man! All right,
All right, so you wanted to talk about something on the wiki?
the Christopher Lee page. Read it out loud because it's very. Well, it just details his life, and he had a really. He's not dead though, is he?
Yeah, he died recently, unfortunately, just a few years ago, I believe.
Well, he had a really impressive life, and then I think to myself, I would really like to have a similar life. Why don't we read through it and we can talk about it?
Do you have it in the notes?
I was hoping you could pull it up.
Oh, Christopher Lee wiki. You're just talking about like the base Wikipedia.
Is there just like a quick summary of this?
Oh, let's see. Well, are you talking about like his early life?
Yeah, like because his personal life is really impressive. Like he was royalty somehow, or like a duke or a baron.
I know that he was like a literally a secret agent in World War II, and did secret missions for the government that he can't talk about. And there was I saw an interview with Peter Jackson where Christopher Lee told him a story, basically implied that he had like killed people in secret missions, and talked about because there was like a stabbing scene and wanted to
he wanted to change it
accurate. Yeah.
Oh my god.
He's like, no, this is actually what happens when somebody gets stabbed in the chest.
Well, I heard that like his dad or he or like either a duke or baron. Is that true?
Let's see.
Yes, the royal.
He's royal blood.
There's so much on this wiki. Oh my gosh.
And I wonder if it's all true. Maybe some of it is made up or embellished.
Yeah.
And I know that he very late in life, so very recently, he put out like a metal album where he did the vocals. I know. And just a fucking full life,
And a cool thing too, before he died, he recorded several commentary tracks for Hammer. They've been doing Blu-ray re-releases of a lot of the movies, and he recorded commentary tracks for a few of his movies. So that's really cool. And those are really recent.
Mhm.
Like he recorded those right before he died. So
and he was really tall and handsome. So he was he like the James Bond basis for James Bond?
So I've heard that I don't know if he was accurate, literally, but I think people just compare him to.
And he looks kind of tough.
Life. He
was a spy, and he was a. Oh my god! Can you imagine what a great cover? You're an actor. Christopher Lee really assassinate the president of some faraway country or nearby country.
Yeah, so looking at this, he had 3 metal EPs. He had a Heavy Metal Christmas, a Heavy Metal Christmas 2, and Metal Night was the other one.
Metal Night.
Nice.
All right, let's see here. I gotta scroll up because there's Jesus Christ, there's so much on here.
Yeah, maybe it was too much. I figured
there's a I'm trying to think how I can condense this because there is that much to it.
Oh yeah. No.
We can give it up too if it's too awkward.
Yeah, no, he definitely is.
So we should try to be more like Christopher Lee.
And he played he was Gandalf in the animated Lord of the Rings movie, and then
of course
Mm-hmm.
Get that. But yeah, as I say, one of the very few roles where he actually gets to play a heroic character, a good guy.
That's nice.
Which he always complained about.
Mm-hmm.
And then it makes know, Sans, that he was like second fiddle, that he was like the silver medal.
Mm.
He was so much better than freaking, Bonet or whatever.
He wasn't a big star at that.
No, I just mean like in the story.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, really? You're not gonna go for Grizzly?
Yeah, I was hoping he would be in the movie more.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
He kind of appears in the beginning and then more near the end, but he's kind of gone from the middle of the movie for a bit. And he was definitely one of the better aspects of the movie, for sure.
Agreed.
Mm.
All right. Well, there you go. The man who could cheat death.
Absolutely. So next week's episode, we're talking about The Hunger, which was released in 1983. That one being directed by Tony Scott, which is a, quote, vampire, and I'm going to air quote that because they never actually use the word vampire in the movie at all. But it definitely is that. Or like she's some sort of alien parasite. You be the judge. It's not really fully explained.
Science!
So yeah, we'll talk The Hunger for our next episode, but until then, of course, the best thing to do to keep in contact with us is to follow us over on Twitter at HandleWithScare. Of course, you can find all of our video content on our YouTube at HandleWithScarePod. But in the meantime, guys, I hope everyone enjoys their weeks, and we'll see you next week when we wrap up our Fear of Aging in a more erotic ending than normal. It's going to be an interesting one.